This question is for Professor Becker. Around the time of the 1987 financial crash, in one of your business week columns, you predicted that the crisis would not have a big effect on human capital because it was mostly on financial markets, and this prediction proved to be true. It bore out pretty well. If you had made the same prediction in 2008, it wouldn't have borne pretty well, because what happened after is the ratio of the employed to the working age population has remained, it fell very fast and then has remained stable but at a very low level. So what has changed? Thank you.
Well, I didn't make the same prediction in 2008.
Should we take three at a time?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sure.
Go ahead. Identify yourself.
Sure. I'm Dave Bridgeland, and this is for Professor Becker as well. What do you think of Tyler Cowan's great stagnation claim that the U.S. has run out of the easy pickings of from improved human capital, cheap land, and technology?
And three, right behind you.
Yep.
Don Griswold. And Professor Becker, I hesitate to ask you this question, which I think was an obvious misstatement, and I hesitate because back in the late 70s I did the same in a public forum with Professor Friedman, and he publicly humiliated me. But I've got a tough skin, so I'll ask you. Immigration. Immigration, if we have such a big need for an influx of low-wage workers, how is it possibly good economic policy to saddle each immigrant with $45,000 of debt?
Okay. All right, so let me take the question. I'll leave your question for last. Let me take I'll take your question first. I think the hypothesis is nonsense. I see no evidence of that. It's always easy to say. I have a lot of graduate students come up to me and say, Professor Becker, when you were doing your research, all the easy ideas were there. Now that you guys picked off all the low-hanging fruit, you have to pick up the high-hanging fruit. My answer always is, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, but whether you notice that it's low-hanging, that's where the insight comes in. So where we run out of ideas, there's no evidence in a lot of areas of innovation that we're running out of ideas. Maybe we will. Nobody can say we won't, but there's no evidence we're running out of ideas. A lot of innovations are going on. What they will be 10 years from now, I don't know. Eddie doesn't even know. I mean, you work for the government. You got to make these forecasts. But I'm going to make the forecast. We don't know what they're going to be. But there's always, Alvin Hansen had the theory, secular stagnation, very popular in the 1930s. And he had some of the similar ideas. We run out of the frontier areas, there's no new technology, and so on. You go back and read Hansen on these, you find exactly those ideas. We read them now, we look like the biggest nonsense. I mean, at that time, people took them seriously because we were in a Great Depression. People said, well, maybe it's something we're going to live with forever. And people now say, well, we've had this recession now, and it's because we don't have the innovations that come by. We're stuck with this slow recovery. I say it's just as much nonsense as it was in the 1930s. I don't think we run out of ideas. I don't think we run out of land. I say it's an empty country. We haven't run out of increasing the productivity of land. I mean, we have global warming problems. We have serious problems. I'm not denying we have serious problems, but we certainly haven't run out of the capacity to counter these problems. And I think any of the short-term problems we have nothing to do with long-term difficulties. So that would be my answer to that question. Now, on the question on the wage rates, I mean, when you say we need low-wage people, I don't know if we need low-wage people. We need immigrants of different types of earning power. You take a typical person from Mexico, earning, you'll know that figure better than I would. I usually use they're earning like $1 an hour. I don't know what the average working Mexican would be working, maybe come to the United States, they can earn, let's say, $9 to $10 an hour. And we know from the immigrants who have been captured, we look at the average earnings of them, they're earning more than the minimum wage, actually. Now you say, well, here, now, that's a low-wage person, okay? They come to the United States, they're gonna earn $7 to $8 an hour more than they're earning in the country they're coming from. Multiply that times $2,000, 2,000 hours, you're getting $14,000 a year, plus they don't have the unemployment prospects that traditionally they had in Mexico. Mexico is improving, fortunately. So $14,000 a year, they have a fee of $50,000, they pay that back in less than 4 years. Less than 4 years. I mean, I'm not counting interest rate and so on. So everybody say, that's a great investment. Where is this a bad investment? If you told me I can invest in a stock and I get a payback in 4 years, I'd say, great, show me where that stock is, I'll invest in it. So even for unskilled workers, the percentage increase in their earnings is going to be bigger here than it is for the skilled workers. The absolute amount is going to be bigger for the skilled workers. Well, for the unskilled workers, the percentage increase is better. It's a very good investment for the unskilled workers. I just don't buy it as a bad investment. We're not saddling them with the debt. We're providing them with the opportunity to earn a lot more than they can earn in the country they're coming from. And I think that's what they're looking for. They want that. They would take that option if they had it. We just don't offer them that option. Now, on your question, which in a sense I find is the hardest question of the three that were asked, you know, what's the difference between, you were asking, what's the difference between 1987 when you look at the data now, you don't even notice there was a crash. Because in 2007, it wasn't a stock market crash mainly. The stock market did go down, I think from the peak of then $14,000 to $6,000. And let me add, I was smart enough to buy the S&P index at $6,000, so I've done okay. And let me also add, it's one of the few investments I've done okay on. That one I did do okay on, because I felt this, I mean, the economy isn't tanked that badly, the things are going to come back. So that wasn't mainly a stock market crash. That was a financial crash, and very different. And we can go into all the reasons, but in 1987, we did not have a financial crash. We did not have, we had the savings and loans and so on, but that was a tiny, small potatoes compared to what we had now. So when you had a financial crash on your hand, when most of the big banks were insolvent, and they would go bankrupt if things were proceeding. When we had some bankruptcy, and I can go on and on, the difference in the episodes were enormous, and that's why they were different. That's why I didn't predict we would see no crash, and that's why it's really hard to compare those two periods.
I want to follow up on this. Obviously, Gary, all the questions, you don't have to say the questions are for Gary. They're all for Gary because I didn't talk. But I do want to say one thing on the issue of employment in the recent business cycle. This business cycle is very different from any other business cycle. If you look at the relationship between unemployment and employment, this is unique. So if you were to look at the unemployment rate and plot that against the employment rate, everybody remembers what the employment rate is. It's the ratio of people working to the number of individuals in the working age population. Up until this recent recession, they were perfectly correlated, inversely correlated of course, but perfectly correlated. When one went up, the other went down. So you could look at the unemployment rate, and that was a sufficient statistic for what was happening in the labor market. If you look from 2009 on, what you see is the employment rate is flat at 58.5%, down from 63.5% where it was during pre-recession times. And the question is why? What's the difference between this recession and the other recessions? Essentially, that's a labor force participation issue. But there are a couple of stories that I think pertain to this, one of which by our Chicago colleague, Casey Mulligan. And I know in some ways this has been somewhat made a caricature of because people think, well, it can't be the whole story. But there's certainly something to this. What Casey argues is that a large part of the low labor force participation rate and the low employment rate is a function of government programs. Doesn't say we shouldn't have those government programs, but what he says is one of the costs of having high food stamp programs, having high unemployment programs, having high Medicaid programs, having housing programs, is that it lowers the value of work. And if it lowers the value of work, it changes the value of being unemployed, and as a result, we see people staying out of the labor force more than they did in the past. That may not be the full story, but it's certainly part of it. There's a little bit of it that's demographics. We do expect the employment rate to come down simply because we have an aging population. But that doesn't happen dramatically, and if you look at what happened in 2007, you see it dropping sharply and flattening. That can't be the long-run trend of demographics.
We're going to go down that line. Go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Lizard and Professor Baker. I'm Jacqueline. I have no economic background at all, but I have a very simple and straightforward question for both of you. So we talk about human capital policy. So in your opinion, which country have, or maybe which countries have the best human capital policies in the last decades? And also further, which countries do you think are taking progress or have made huge progresses in terms of attracting talents?
We go back.
I'm Leif Jackson. Nice to meet you. I just had a quick question. I work in education, what I'm seeing with a lot of our teachers is actually financial incentives might be a dissuader from what they have in terms of intrinsic motivation. I recently read a book on this by Daniel Pink called Drive. And what we're seeing in this country is more, the higher the per pupil allocation, usually that's inversely correlated with the actual performance of a city or a state. For example, DC's in the bottom 20% of states in this country, and they have the highest per pupil allocation in terms of number of students. So how do you maintain the intrinsic motivation of teachers while increasing their wage?